What's going on, family? This is Scrapbook Boxing, the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. This week we're going to be covering African-American fighters. I still have on the agenda Rocky Castellani, Vince Martinez, Robert Villamain, Buddy Bear, Tommy Farr, Bar Pastor, Billy Graham, Aldi Spoldy, Chico Vijar, just to name a few. But we're going to be covering African-American fighters the entire week. I had this program scheduled about a month ago, but due to other obligations, I was unable to provide that program to you. So right now we're going to be covering Bob Baker. Now, Bob Baker had a total bout of 68. He won 51 of those 68 fights, lost 16. He knocked out 20 of those men. He was only stopped 3 times. Bob Baker was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on October 26, 1926. He unfortunately died April 23rd in 2002. Now, Bob Baker was a heavyweight who stood 6 foot 2 inches. He had a 10-year career span from 1949 to 1959. His last fight was October 10th, 1950, against a fighter by the name of Frankie Daniels. Frankie Daniels was a phenomenal fighter. I do have his profile. I will be covering him as well. He had 34-17 at the time of that fight. April 21st, 1949, he fought a fighter by the name of Ray Bassett. That was his professional debut. Ray Bassett had a record of 1-0 at that time, and that's the thing about these fighters. Bob Baker didn't fight a man who had 2 wins and 11 losses. He jumped right in and fought a man who had 1 win and no losses. He had 1 fight advantage over Bob Baker, and he defeated him. But he fought outstanding fighters. He fought Eddie Machen. He lost to him, but Eddie Machen at the time, he had 21 fights and no losses. Eddie Machen went on to face Smoking Joe Frazier. Phenomenal fighters. He would fight Clarence Henry. He lost to Clarence Henry, but Clarence Henry had 28-2 fight schedule. His record was 28-2. He was in there with phenomenal fighters, Bob Satterfield and Willie James and Holman Williams and others. So that was an outstanding fight for him, although he took a loss, no problem. He lost against Harold Carter. Harold Carter fought Bob Satterfield 3 times. He had a record of 21-2 at the time he fought Bob Baker. And this is what I'm talking about. You get in there with fighters. You want the best to fight the best, whether you win or you lose. That's the way you please the crowd. That's the way you build your resume. That's the way you get better. That goes to show what kind of fighter you are. He would face Jimmy Bivens. He would defeat Jimmy Bivens. And at the time, Jimmy Bivens had a record of 78-21. Now, Jimmy Bivens was one of the murderous row heavyweights. He was in there with everybody. Lloyd Marshall, you name him. Jimmy Bivens is only the 3rd African-American fighter to face Joe Louis. Now, although that was an exhibition, but he would face Joe Louis outside of Jersey Joe Walcott and Eddie Charles. And, of course, you had John Henry Lewis, but that was in 1938. And John Henry Lewis was the light heavyweight champion at the time. And he just needed a break. So Joe Louis gave him a fight opportunity. But just goes the experience that Jimmy Bivens had at that time. He would face Roy Harris. He would lose to Roy Harris, but Roy Harris had a record of 20-0 at the time. No losses. Roy Harris would eventually face fighters such as Floyd Patterson. Floyd Patterson was heavyweight champion at the time when Roy Harris would face him. He would face fighters such as George Chuvalo. He would defeat George Chuvalo. George Chuvalo was 12-1 at the time that Bob Baker faced him. George Chuvalo fought Muhammad Ali. He fought Smoking Joe Frazier, Jerry Kawari, Floyd Patterson. He fought them all. He would face Tommy Hurricane Jackson. He would lose to him, but Tommy Hurricane Jackson was 25-4. He would face guys like Floyd Patterson, Jimmy Slade, Ezard Charles. So Tommy Jackson was an outstanding fighter. Now I want to talk about Tommy Hurricane Jackson just for one quick moment. I did a video with Floyd Patterson, and I was telling you about Tommy Hurricane Jackson was supposed to be ranked number 1 at that particular time. And Rocky Marciano had retired in 1956 after facing Archie Moore in 1955. Now at that time, Archie Moore was a light heavyweight champion. Floyd Patterson was ranked number 1 in the light heavyweight division. Bob Baker, the man we're talking about now, was ranked number 2. Tommy Jackson was supposed to be ranked number 1. Rocky Marciano faced Archie Moore in 1955 to defend his heavyweight championship, and then he would retire after facing Archie Moore. So him, I'm talking about, Rocky Marciano. He would sit down and decide, you know what? I see a couple of smoke coming my way. Let me sit to the side. And this is what I always talked about when you let a man fight himself out of a fight. Bob Baker was ranked number 2. Hurricane Jackson was supposed to be ranked number 1. So what Rocky Marciano did was he selected Archie Moore, who was a light heavyweight champion, who he already defeated in 1955, and Floyd Patterson, who was never ranked in the heavyweight division. He was ranked number 1 in the light heavyweight division in 1956, but they slid Floyd Patterson in number 4 position in the heavyweight rankings. And they slid Archie Moore number 1. Tommy Hurricane Jackson, they made number 3. Bob Baker was always number 2, but he was the problem. This is the reason why, and I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to tell you the truth. That's why Rocky Marciano stepped to the side, because he didn't want any smoke with Bob Baker. You're not going to hear about that from anybody. I did my research. That's what it is. So let's get back to Bob Baker's record. He would face Johnny Holman. He would defeat Johnny Holman. Johnny Holman at the time had a record of 26-11. But Johnny Holman fought everybody. This is what I'm talking about. He would face Nino Valdez. He would defeat Nino Valdez. At the time, Nino Valdez had a record of 33-10. Rocky Marciano noticed that Nino Valdez was in the rankings. That was a problem. Coley Wallace, the only man to defeat Rocky Marciano in the amateurs. Bob Baker would defeat Coley Wallace. At the time, Coley Wallace had a record of 22-4. Outstanding victory for Bob Baker. He would face Rex Lane. Rex Lane would get a title shot against Rocky Marciano. Bob Baker defeated Rex Lane twice. At the time, Rex Lane had a record of 49-11. In his 34th fight, he would face Archie Moore. Now, he would lose to Archie Moore, but at the time, Archie Moore had a record of 144-19, and we already know Archie Moore was in there with everybody. Phenomenal fighter. He would defeat Joey Maxim and win the light heavyweight championship. He should have won that 10 years before then. He would fight Sid Peaks. Sid Peaks was a very strong, muscle-bound fighter. But if he hit you, you were gone. At the time, Sid Peaks had a record of 32-13. He would defeat Sid Peaks. And he would fight him July 25th, 1950. But I just wanted to give you a perspective of Big Bob Baker. Bob Baker was a phenomenal fighter. I will be placing him in my Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. Unfortunately, he never got a title shot opportunity, because Floyd Patterson would face Tommy Hurricane Jackson, because Jackson was making a lot of noise. And Tommy Hurricane Jackson had Whitey Bimstein and Freddie Brown in his corner. Rocky Marciano was very good friends with Whitey Bimstein and Freddie Brown. But if it wasn't for Teddy Brenner, who was the matchmaker, Tommy Hurricane Jackson would never got that opportunity. So Floyd Patterson was forced to face Tommy Hurricane Jackson in June. He would defeat Jackson, but Jackson did finally get his opportunity. And then he would face Archie Moore in November of that same year of 1956. Amazing. But because of that, Bob Baker never got his opportunity for the heavyweight championship of the world. This is Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. Salute to my subscribers. Salute to Bob Baker. I'm going to be doing African American fighters all week long. Peace.